They laughed when she got $1, until a Navy SEAL and his dog led her to the secret that owned everything they claimed. At a grand mountain lodge in Wyoming, Emily Carter stood alone as her family celebrated their fortune, while she was handed a single coin and nothing else. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and her world collapsed, until a silent Navy SEAL and his watchful dog stepped forward, guiding her into the mountains, toward a hidden truth no one saw coming. Comment 1 if you believe justice always comes back around, or 0 if you think power always wins, and tell us where you're watching from. The Whitaker Lodge stood like a monument against the winter sky, its massive timber beams darkened by decades of snow and wind. Nestled high in the mountains of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, it overlooked a valley now buried beneath a blanket of white. Smoke curled lazily from stone chimneys, and warm golden light spilled from tall windows, promising comfort to those inside. Inside, the air was thick, not with grief but with anticipation. Crystal glasses clinked. Low laughter echoed beneath the vaulted ceilings. Expensive coats were draped over polished chairs, and catered trays lined the long oak table where the Whitaker family had gathered, not to mourn Harold Whitaker, but to claim what he left behind. At the far end of the room sat Emily Carter. She wore a simple dark coat, one she had owned for years, the fabric worn thin at the cuffs. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers trembling slightly, though she tried to keep them still. Her eyes remained lowered, avoiding the glances, the whispers, the quiet smirks that drifted her way. She did not belong here, not in their eyes. But she had belonged to him. For 3 years, while the others stayed away, while they traveled and posted smiling photos from yachts and private clubs, Emily had been here. She had sat beside her grandfather when his hands began to shake. She had read to him when his eyesight failed. She had listened when he spoke, really listened, when his voice grew softer and the world stopped paying attention. And now he was gone. At the center of the room stood a tall man in a dark suit, his silver hair combed neatly back. Attorney Daniel Mercer adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "If we can have everyone's attention," he said, his voice calm but firm. The room quieted, though not completely. A few chuckles lingered. Someone popped open a bottle of champagne in the corner. Emily looked up for the first time. Across the room, her cousins, Ryan Whitaker and Blake Whitaker, leaned casually against the fireplace, their confidence filling the space like smoke. Beside them stood Vanessa, their sister, already scrolling through her phone as if the outcome were a foregone conclusion. Because to them, it was. Daniel Mercer unfolded the document. Last Will and Testament of Harold James Whitaker. The words rolled out steadily, formally. Donations to charities, gifts to longtime ranch hands, bonuses to staff. Then came the real moment. To my grandson, Ryan Whitaker, I leave the Northern Ranch holdings, including all livestock, grazing rights, and associated assets. Ryan grinned instantly, exchanging a satisfied look with his brother. To my grandson, Blake Whitaker, I leave the Southern properties, including timber contracts and recreational leases. Blake let out a low whistle. That's what I'm talking about. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Whitaker, I leave the Whitaker Lodge and all surrounding development rights. Vanessa barely looked up, already typing something, her lips curling into a small, victorious smile. Emily felt something in her chest tighten. She hadn't expected much. She told herself that over and over again. But still, there had been something. A quiet hope she had never spoken aloud. Daniel Mercer paused. And to my granddaughter, Emily Carter. The room shifted. For the first time, people actually looked at her home. Emily straightened slightly in her chair, her heart beginning to pound. She didn't breathe. Daniel Mercer reached into a small envelope. He walked slowly across the room, his polished shoes echoing against the wooden floor. Each step seemed louder than the last. When he reached her, he didn't smile. He simply opened the envelope and placed something cold and small into her palm. A single silver dollar. The room was silent for exactly 1 second. Then it erupted. Laughter burst from the fireplace. Ryan bent forward, slapping his knee. Blake let out a sharp bark of disbelief. Even Vanessa finally looked up, her eyebrows lifting as she stared. "You've got to be kidding me," Ryan said, shaking his head. $1? That's it?" Blake pulled out his phone, already recording. "This is unreal. All those years playing nurse to the old man, and this is what you get?" Emily stared at the coin in her hand. It felt heavier than it should have. Cold, meaningless. Vanessa walked closer, heels clicking softly. She tilted her head, examining Emily like she was something small and curious. "Well," she said lightly, "I guess that answers that." Before Emily could respond, Ryan grabbed a glass from the table and stepped toward her, swirling the amber liquid inside. "You know what?" he said. "We should celebrate this." He raised the glass as if making a toast. "To Emily," he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Proof that not everyone gets a happy ending." And then, with a careless flick of his wrist, he spilled the whiskey. It splashed across her coat, soaking into the fabric, the sharp scent rising instantly. The liquid dripped down the front, staining the dark cloth even darker. Emily flinched, but did not move. The laughter grew louder. "Oh man, I'm sorry," Ryan said, though he clearly wasn't. "Guess that coat's worth more than your inheritance." Blake zoomed in with his phone. "Hold still, Emily. This is priceless." Emily's fingers tightened around the coin. Her face burned, but her eyes stayed dry. She would not cry here. Not in front of them. Not for them. At the far end of the room, someone else was watching. Caleb Hayes stood near the back wall, half in shadow. He hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, but his jaw had tightened. Beside him, Atlas, a powerful Belgian Malinois with a dark coat and sharp, intelligent eyes, had gone completely still. The dog's ears were forward, his body rigid, his gaze locked on Emily. Caleb noticed it immediately. Atlas didn't react like this without reason. Not anymore. Not after everything they'd been through. Caleb followed the dog's line of sight, watching the young woman standing alone in the center of the room, soaked in whiskey, surrounded by laughter that didn't belong in a place like this. Something old stirred in his chest. A memory. A feeling he knew too well. Men laughing when someone else broke. Caleb exhaled slowly. Atlas took one step forward, then another. Caleb didn't stop him. Because for the first time since they had entered that room, Atlas had chosen a target, and Caleb knew. That meant this wasn't over. Not even close. The laughter lingered in the air like smoke long after the moment had passed. Glasses clinked again. Conversations resumed. Music picked back up from somewhere in the lodge, soft and cheerful, as if nothing of consequence had just happened. But for Emily Carter, everything had changed. She stood frozen for a second longer, the silver dollar pressed tightly into her palm, its edge digging into her skin. The whiskey on her coat had already begun to soak through, cold now, clinging to her like something she couldn't shake off. "All right," Ryan said, waving his hand dismissively. "Show's over." He turned toward the attorney. "We're done here, right?" Daniel Mercer hesitated, glancing briefly at Emily before answering. "There are still Yeah, Blake cut in. "We'll handle the rest later. Right now, we've got a lot to celebrate." Vanessa was already walking away, laughing into her phone. "You are not going to believe this." Emily swallowed. She waited, just for a second, as if anyone might say something different, might correct it, might call it what it was. No one did. Ryan turned back toward her, his expression shifting from amusement to something colder. "You heard the will," he said. "That's all you get." Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. "You've been staying here, 3 years?" Blake added, stepping closer. "Rent-free? Food? Everything. I'd say you came out ahead." "I wasn't," Emily started, her voice quiet. "Doesn't matter," Ryan interrupted. "This place isn't yours. Never was." He gestured toward the door with a sharp flick of his fingers. "You've got 30 minutes." The words landed harder than anything else that night. Emily blinked. 30? "To pack your stuff," Ryan said. "We've got plans tonight. Guests, media. I'm not having this place looking like a charity shelter." Blake chuckled. "Besides, wouldn't want you getting too comfortable. Wouldn't want to confuse you about your status." Emily looked toward Daniel Mercer again, searching for something. Anything. The attorney's face was tight, conflicted, but he said nothing. The silence answered her. 30 minutes, Ryan repeated. Clock's ticking. The room moved on without her. People drifted past, as if she were no longer part of the space. Conversations rose and fell. Laughter returned. Someone turned the music up louder. Emily turned slowly and walked toward the staircase. Each step felt heavier than the last. Upstairs, the hallway was quiet, dim. The warmth of the lodge didn't seem to reach here anymore. Her room sat at the end, the door slightly open, just as she had left it that morning. She stepped inside. It was small, simple. A bed, a dresser, a chair by the window overlooking the valley. Nothing like the rooms her cousins occupied downstairs, but it had been hers. She stood there for a moment, taking it in. 3 years, 3 winters, 3 summers, 3 years of mornings spent helping her grandfather walk the porch, of evenings reading beside the fire, of quiet conversations no one else had bothered to have. She moved quickly then, a suitcase from the closet, clothes folded with shaking hands, a few books, a photograph from the bedside table, her and Harold both smiling, the mountains behind them. She hesitated over the rest. There wasn't time. Downstairs, voices echoed louder now. Someone shouted for more champagne. A burst of laughter followed. Emily zipped the suitcase closed. When she stepped back into the hallway, her chest felt hollow. At the top of the stairs, she paused. Then she walked down. The moment she reached the bottom, everything seemed brighter, louder, colder. Ryan glanced at his watch. "Look at that," he said. "You made it before the timer ran out." Blake smirked. "Impressive." Vanessa didn't even look up this time. Emily dragged her suitcase toward the front door. No one offered to help, no one moved. When she reached the door, she opened it herself. Cold air rushed in immediately, sharp and biting. Snow drifted across the wide stone steps outside, swirling in the wind. The night had fully settled over the valley, dark and endless. Emily stepped out. Behind her, the door closed. Just like that. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She stood there for a moment, the cold seeping through her shoes, her coat still damp with whiskey. Her breath came out in soft clouds as the wind pushed against her. Her suitcase slipped from her hand and fell onto the snow. From inside, the music swelled again. She turned back once, just once, looking through the tall windows. She could see them, laughing, drinking, moving on like she had never existed. The weight in her chest broke, not into tears, not yet. just something deeper, quieter, something that hurt more. A door opened behind her. Emily flinched slightly, turning. Caleb Hayes stepped out onto the porch. The cold didn't seem to bother him. He stood still for a moment, scanning the yard out of instinct before his eyes settled on her. Atlas followed. The dog moved past Caleb without hesitation, straight to Emily. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel his warmth against the cold. His head tilted slightly, his eyes steady, alert, but not threatening, gentle. Emily looked down at him, confused. Atlas stepped closer and pressed lightly against her leg. The contact was small, but it grounded her in a way nothing else had. Caleb watched the interaction carefully. Atlas didn't do this, not without a reason. "Hey," Caleb said, his voice low, steady. Emily looked up. For a moment, she didn't recognize him from inside the lodge. Out here in the cold, he looked different. Less like a guest, more like something solid. Real. "I'm Caleb," he said. "I knew your grandfather." Emily nodded faintly, unsure what to say. "I heard what happened in there," he continued. "Didn't sit right." Emily gave a small, tired breath. "It's fine." Caleb shook his head once. "No, it's not." Atlas shifted slightly, staying close to her side. Caleb glanced at the dog, then back at Emily. "He told me something," Caleb said. "A while back. Said if there ever came a time you walked out of this place, holding that coin." Emily's fingers tightened instinctively around it. "I was supposed to find you," Caleb finished. Emily frowned, confusion cutting through the numbness. "Why?" Caleb studied her for a second. Then he said quietly, "Because he knew something the rest of them didn't." The wind picked up, carrying snow across the porch. Emily looked past him, down the long driveway that disappeared into darkness. She had nowhere to go. Nothing waiting for her. Atlas leaned gently into her again. Caleb gestured toward the truck parked nearby, its engine already idling. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of the cold." Emily hesitated. Everything in her life had just been stripped away in less than an hour. And now this. A stranger. A dog. A promise she didn't understand. But something in Caleb's voice didn't feel uncertain. And the dog, Atlas, hadn't left her side. Emily nodded slowly. Caleb picked up her suitcase without asking and walked toward the truck. Atlas followed Emily closely as she moved beside him. Behind them, the lodge glowed warm and bright against the snow. Ahead of them, the mountain road disappeared into darkness. Emily climbed into the passenger seat. The door shut with a solid, final sound. Caleb circled around, got in, and pulled the truck into gear. As they drove away, the lodge grew smaller in the rearview mirror, until it vanished completely. And with it, everything Emily had known. The road ahead stretched into the silent mountains, and for the first time that night, something had changed. Not everything was gone. Not yet. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness as the road wound down the mountain. Snow drifted across the windshield in soft waves, catching the beams and disappearing just as quickly. The world outside felt distant, quiet, as if the storm had swallowed everything behind them. Inside the truck, there was only the low hum of the engine and silence. Emily sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her suitcase tucked behind her, her hands resting in her lap. The silver dollar was still there, pressed between her fingers. She hadn't let go of it since the moment it was placed in her palm. She didn't know why. Maybe because it was all she had left. Caleb drove with steady focus, his hands firm on the wheel, his posture alert but controlled. Years of training showed in the smallest movements, his eyes scanning the road, checking mirrors, adjusting to the shifting terrain without hesitation. Atlas sat between them. Not in the back. Not where he was trained to stay. Right there, in the space between driver and passenger, his body angled slightly toward Emily. Caleb noticed it immediately. "Atlas?" he said quietly. "Back." The command was simple, familiar. Atlas didn't move. Emily glanced at the dog, unsure what to do. "Should I?" "Give him a second," Caleb said, his voice calm but watchful. Atlas's ears, palms were forward, his body still, his eyes fixed, not on Caleb, but on Emily's hand, on the coin. Slowly, the dog leaned closer. Emily instinctively pulled her hand back a little, startled. Atlas stopped immediately, not pushing further, just watching, waiting. "Easy," Caleb murmured. Emily hesitated, then slowly opened her hand. The silver dollar rested in her palm, catching the faint light from the dashboard. Its surface was worn, edges softened by time. It didn't look special, not worth anything close to what had just been taken from her. Atlas lowered his head. He sniffed it once. Then again. His entire posture shifted. Not aggressive, not curious. Focused. Like he recognized it. Emily felt a strange chill run through her. Why is he doing that? Caleb didn't answer right away, because he didn't have one. Atlas had been trained for years, military-grade commands, high-level obedience. He had operated in environments where hesitation could cost lives, and he had never ignored a direct command. Until now. "Atlas," Caleb said again, firmer this time. "Back." Nothing. The dog remained exactly where he was. Then, slowly, Atlas sat, right beside Emily, not looking at Caleb, not waiting for the next command, just sitting there, alert, steady, as if he had made a decision. Caleb exhaled quietly. "That's new," he said. Emily looked between them. "He's not listening to you?" Caleb shook his head once. "He's listening." He glanced at Atlas again. "He's just choosing something else." The words hung in the air. Emily looked back down at the coin, her fingers tightening slightly around it. "What is this?" she whispered. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching over packed snow. For a moment, Caleb said nothing. Then, without taking his eyes off the road, he spoke. "Your grandfather wasn't just a rancher." Emily frowned slightly. "I know he did business. Land deals, partnerships." Caleb shook his head. "That's what people saw." He paused. What they didn't see was everything underneath. Emily turned toward him, her confusion growing. "What does that mean?" Caleb adjusted his grip on the wheel, the memory pulling at something deeper in his expression. "About 6 years ago," he said, "I was coming out of a bad deployment. Lost men, bad intel. Whole thing went sideways." His voice stayed even, but there was something beneath it. Tight, controlled. "I wasn't sleeping, wasn't thinking straight. They were talking about pulling me from active operations." Emily listened quietly. "Then I got a call," Caleb continued. "Private contract, remote, paid well enough that nobody asked questions." He gave a small, humorless breath. "Turned out, it was your grandfather." Emily blinked. "He hired you?" "Not just me," Caleb said. "He had a network, people like me. Guys who knew how to handle things that didn't make it into reports." Emily felt her chest tighten slightly. "That doesn't sound like him," she said softly. Caleb glanced at her briefly. That's because you knew one side of him. The truck hit a patch of uneven road, the suspension shifting slightly. He had land out here, Caleb went on. Not the kind you see in brochures. Remote. Hard to reach. Places people don't go unless they have a reason. Emily looked out the window, the darkness stretching endlessly between the trees. And he trusted you? She asked. Caleb nodded once. Eventually. He paused. And he talked about you. Emily turned back to him, surprised. Me? Yeah, Caleb said. Didn't say much. But when he did, it mattered. Atlas shifted slightly beside her, his shoulder brushing her leg again. He said if anything ever happened, Caleb continued, if things went the way he thought they might, I was to watch for one thing. Emily's heart began to beat a little faster. What? Caleb nodded toward her hand. The coin. Emily stared at it. This? She said. It's just... No, Caleb said quietly. It's not. Silence filled the truck again. The road narrowed as they moved deeper into the mountains. Snowbanks rose higher on either side, the trees closing in, their branches heavy with ice. Emily looked back down at the silver dollar. For the first time, it didn't feel worthless. It felt like a question. Atlas leaned in once more, resting his head lightly against her knee. Emily hesitated, then slowly reached out. Her fingers brushed the side of his neck. Warm, solid, real. Atlas didn't move away. Instead, he let out a slow breath and settled closer. Caleb watched it happen, and something in his chest shifted. Because that wasn't training. That wasn't command. That was choice. The truck continued forward into the darkness, deeper into the mountains, farther from everything Emily had lost, and closer to something she didn't yet understand. But for the first time since she stepped out of that lodge, she wasn't alone, and Atlas had made sure of that. The truck pushed deeper into the mountains, its headlights carving a narrow path through the storm. Snow fell thicker now, swirling in unpredictable gusts that blurred the edges of the road. The world beyond the windshield had turned into shifting shades of white and gray, where sky and ground seemed to blend into one endless expanse. Emily pulled her coat tighter around her, though the cold she felt wasn't just from the weather. It was everything she had left behind, everything that had been taken from her in a single night. Caleb adjusted the heater slightly, but didn't speak. His focus stayed on the road, on the terrain, on the subtle movements of the truck beneath him. His instincts were fully engaged now, the same instincts that had kept him alive in places far more dangerous than this. Atlas lifted his head suddenly. His ears snapped forward. Caleb noticed it instantly. "What is it?" he murmured. Atlas didn't bark, didn't move abruptly. He simply stared ahead. Caleb's grip on the wheel tightened. The wind shifted sharply, slamming a wall of snow across the road. Visibility dropped to almost nothing in seconds. The headlights reflected back into the cab, turning the windshield into a glowing blur. "Hold on," Caleb said. The truck slowed, then slowed more, until it was barely crawling forward. Emily leaned slightly toward the glass, trying to see anything beyond the storm. "Can you see the road?" "Not really," Caleb answered. "Just the shape of it." The tires crunched over uneven ground, the truck drifting slightly to the side before Caleb corrected it smoothly. Atlas stood up. This time, Caleb didn't tell him to sit. The dog stepped forward, placing his front paws lightly on the edge of the dashboard, his body angled toward the windshield. His eyes were locked on something beyond the whiteout. "Easy," Caleb said quietly, watching him. Atlas leaned forward just a fraction more, then shifted his weight. Left. Caleb followed, turning the wheel slightly. The truck adjusted course. Another gust of wind hit, stronger this time. Snow slammed against the side of the vehicle, rocking it just enough to make Emily's breath catch. "Are we okay?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't listening to her. He was watching Atlas. The dog's posture changed again. Right. Caleb turned the wheel again. The truck corrected. A few seconds later, the shape of the road reappeared, faint, barely visible, but there. Caleb exhaled slowly. "He's guiding us," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "He is." The storm didn't let up. For the next 20 minutes, Atlas remained in that position, steady, focused, adjusting with each shift of the terrain. Caleb followed his movements without question, trusting the dog's instincts the same way he had trusted them in far more dangerous places. Because Atlas had never led him wrong. Not once. Emily watched it all unfold, something inside her slowly changing. This wasn't just a dog. This was something else entirely. A partner. A protector. A bridge between worlds she didn't yet understand. Eventually, the storm began to ease. The snow thinned. The wind softened. The road widened just enough to breathe again. Caleb leaned back slightly, though his hands remained steady on the wheel. Atlas dropped back down, returning to his place beside Emily as if nothing had happened. Emily reached out again, this time without hesitation, her fingers brushing through the thick fur along his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Atlas didn't react outwardly, but he stayed close. Caleb glanced at them briefly, something unreadable passing through his expression. "You handled that well," he said. Emily looked up. "I didn't do anything." "You stayed calm," Caleb replied. "Most people don't." Emily gave a faint, tired smile. "I think I ran out of energy to panic." Caleb nodded slightly. He understood that feeling. The road began to climb again, winding upward through dense forest. Tall pines lined both sides, their branches heavy with snow, forming a tunnel of shadow and silence. Emily looked out the window. The mountains felt different out here, not like the ones you see in pictures. These felt alive, watching. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. Caleb took a breath. "It's not on any map you'll find online," he said. "At least not the parts we're heading into." Emily frowned slightly. "How can that be?" "Private land," Caleb answered. "Old land. Layers of ownership, trusts, agreements. Your grandfather was good at that." Emily looked back down at the coin. "He never told me any of this." Caleb nodded. "He wouldn't." "Why?" Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "Because he didn't trust the wrong people not to listen." The words settled heavily between them. Emily thought back to the lodge, to the laughter, to the way her cousins had looked at her, to the way they had looked at everything. Maybe he had been right. The truck turned onto a narrower path, barely more than a break in the trees. Snow covered most of it, the tracks faint and uneven. "Where are we going?" Emily asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowed the truck as the trees began to thin. The forest opened, and beyond it, something appeared. At first, Emily thought it was just another ridge. Then the shape changed. Edges sharpened. Lines emerged. Stone. Wood. Light. Her breath caught. A structure rose from the mountainside, partially hidden by the terrain itself. built into the slope, not on top of it. Massive stone walls blended with the rock around them, while dark timber beams framed tall windows that reflected the fading light of the sky. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was undeniable. "What is that?" Emily whispered. Caleb slowed the truck to a stop at the edge of the clearing. The engine idled softly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Atlas lifted his head again, his body going still in a different way this time. Not alert, not defensive. Recognizing. Caleb looked at the structure, then at Emily. "This," he said quietly, "is where your grandfather kept the truth." Emily stared at it, her heart pounding. Because whatever this place was, it wasn't meant for everyone. It was meant for someone. And somehow, that someone was her. Emily didn't move. For a long moment, she simply sat there, staring through the windshield as the shape of the estate settled into reality. It didn't feel like something built for comfort. It felt deliberate. Every stone placed with intention, every angle designed for more than appearance. The mountain didn't just hold it, it hid it. The engine idled quietly beneath them. Caleb reached over and turned it off. Silence followed. Not the kind of silence you hear in a quiet room, but the kind that exists in places untouched. No distant traffic. No hum of power lines. Just wind moving through trees and the faint creak of branches under snow. Emily swallowed. "My grandfather built this?" she asked. Caleb nodded once. "A long time ago." She shook her head slightly. "I lived with him for 3 years. He never said a word about this." "He wouldn't," Caleb said. Emily turned to him. "You keep saying that like it explains everything." Caleb looked back at the estate. "It explains enough." Atlas shifted beside her, then stood. Before either of them could react, the dog stepped down from the seat and moved toward the door. Caleb opened it. Cold air rushed in again, sharper now, cleaner. Atlas jumped down into the snow without hesitation. Emily followed more slowly, stepping out onto ground that felt untouched. The snow here was deeper, softer, absorbing sound instead of reflecting it. Her boots sank slightly as she found her footing. The air smelled different. Pine, stone, something older. Caleb came around the front of the truck, his eyes scanning the area instinctively, tree line, ridges, shadowed edges of the clearing, always assessing. Always ready. Atlas didn't wait. He began walking toward the estate. Not cautiously, not exploring. Walking like he had been here before. Emily watched him go. "Should he?" she started. "He's fine," Caleb said. "If anything was wrong, we'd know." Emily looked back at the structure. Up close, it was even more imposing. The stone walls rose higher than she expected, built into the mountain itself. Thick wooden beams crossed overhead near the entrance, darkened with age but solid. Tall windows reflected the snow-covered valley behind them, revealing nothing of what was inside. No lights were visible, no movement. It looked abandoned. But it wasn't. Emily could feel that. They approached the main entrance. 2 heavy wooden doors reinforced with iron. There were no visible handles, no keypad, no sign of modern access. Just stillness. Atlas stopped at the base of the steps. He sat, straight, alert, facing the doors. Caleb slowed his pace. "That's not normal," he said under his breath. Emily stepped up beside him. "What do we do?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer immediately. because something in his chest had tightened. The last time Atlas had behaved like this, it had been before a mission, before something important. He stepped forward. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached the door. Nothing happened. He reached out, placing a hand against the wood. Cold, solid, still. Emily stood a few steps back, the silver dollar still in her hand. Her fingers curled around it instinctively. Atlas turned his head slightly, not toward Caleb, toward her. Emily felt it. That pull again. The same quiet pressure she had felt in the truck. The same sense that something was waiting. "For me," she said softly. Caleb looked back at her. "What?" Emily stepped forward slowly. "For me," she repeated. "It's waiting for me." Caleb studied her for a moment. Then he stepped aside. Emily climbed the steps, her boots leaving shallow prints in the snow. The wind moved gently around her, brushing against her coat, lifting strands of her hair. She stood in front of the doors, close enough now to see the details. The wood was carved, not decorative, symbolic. Patterns that didn't match anything she recognized at first glance. Then, a circle, near the center. Faint, subtle, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. About the size of a coin. Emily's breath caught. Her hand moved before she could stop it. She raised the silver dollar. Caleb watched from behind, his body tense, his instincts flaring without a clear reason why. Atlas stood, moved closer. Emily hesitated for just a second. Then she pressed the coin into the center of the circle. Nothing happened. Silence. The wind moved through the trees again. Emily frowned slightly. Maybe it's not a sound, soft, mechanical, so faint it almost felt imagined. Atlas stepped forward. He placed his paw gently against the door, right beside where the coin rested. There was a pause. Then, a deeper sound, a shift beneath the surface. Something inside the structure, waking up. Emily's eyes widened. Caleb took a step forward. The doors didn't swing open. They separated, slowly, deliberately. The seam between them widening with a low, steady hum. Cold air rushed outward, not freezing, but different, controlled, still. Light flickered on inside, soft at first, then brighter, revealing a long stone hallway stretching inward, warm, lived in, prepared. Emily took a step back in shock. "What is this place?" she whispered. Caleb didn't answer, because for the first time since they had arrived, he didn't know. Atlas walked forward, without hesitation, without looking back. Emily stood frozen for a second longer. Then she stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the doors closed behind them, sealing the mountain out. And whatever this place truly was, they were now inside it. The air changed the moment the doors sealed shut behind them. It was warmer inside, but not in a soft or comforting way. The warmth felt controlled, measured, like everything else in this place. The hallway stretched ahead, carved from stone, its walls smooth but unpolished, as if shaped for strength rather than beauty. Soft lights shone along the edges of the ceiling, casting a steady glow that revealed just enough, and nothing more. Emily took a slow step forward. Her boots echoed faintly. Caleb followed a pace behind, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. His instincts had sharpened the moment those doors closed. This place didn't feel abandoned. It felt prepared. Atlas moved ahead of them, calm, focused, his paws silent against the stone floor. "This isn't a house," Caleb said quietly. Emily nodded without taking her eyes off the hallway. "No." They moved deeper. The corridor opened into a wider chamber, high ceilings supported by thick beams of timber reinforced with steel. The design was unlike anything Emily had seen before. It wasn't meant to impress guests. It was meant to endure. A long table stood at the center of the room, covered in maps. Not decorative maps, detailed ones. Topographic lines, land boundaries, water systems, access routes. Some were pinned. Others marked with handwritten notes. Emily stepped closer. Her breath caught. "These are his lands," she said. "The ranches. The valleys." Caleb leaned in slightly. "Not just those," he said. "Look closer." Emily followed the lines outward, beyond the known properties, beyond what had been read in the will. There were connections, hidden routes, overlapping claims, access corridors that tied everything together. It wasn't separate pieces of land. It was one system. And it all led here. A soft sound echoed behind them. Emily turned. A figure stepped into the room. An older woman, her posture straight, her movements calm and deliberate. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, and she wore simple but elegant clothing. Dark, practical, timeless. She looked directly at Emily. Not surprised, not confused, certain. "Miss Carter," she said warmly, "you've finally arrived." Emily froze. "How do you know me?" she asked. The woman smiled gently. "Because I've been waiting for you." Caleb shifted slightly, positioning himself just enough to keep both Emily and the woman within his line of sight. "And you are?" he asked. "Langford," she replied. "Margaret Langford. I've overseen this estate for the past 28 years. Emily blinked. 28? "Your grandfather built this place long before you came to live with him," Margaret said. "But everything here was always meant for you." Emily shook her head slowly. "That doesn't make sense. He never told me." "He couldn't," Margaret said gently. "Not until the right moment." Emily looked down at the coin still in her hand. "This?" she asked. "This is what he left me." Margaret's eyes softened. "That," she said, "is what he trusted you with." Caleb stepped forward slightly. "We opened the door with it." "And with him," Margaret added, nodding toward Atlas. The dog stood quietly beside Emily, his attention fixed, as if he understood every word. "This place doesn't respond to just anyone," Margaret continued. "It requires two things, the rightful heir and the guardian who recognizes them." Emily looked at Atlas. The dog met her gaze, steady, unwavering. A strange warmth spread through her chest. "What is this place?" Emily asked again. Margaret gestured toward a set of doors at the far end of the chamber. "Come," she said. "It's time you saw the rest." They followed her. The doors opened into another room, smaller, darker, more focused. The walls here were lined with screens, panels, and systems that hummed quietly with power. Data flowed across displays. Maps, numbers, coordinates, movement patterns. Emily stepped inside slowly. "What is all this?" Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly as he took it in. "Control," he said. Margaret nodded. "Exactly." She walked to the center of the room where a circular console stood, its surface smooth and dark. At its center was a recessed slot, the same size as the coin. Emily felt her pulse quicken. "This is where it begins," Margaret said. Emily approached carefully. Her hand trembled slightly as she raised the silver dollar again, She placed it into the slot. Nothing happened. Emily frowned. I don't understand. Wait, Margaret said softly. Atlas stepped forward. He placed his paw beside the coin. There was a brief pause. Then, a sharp, precise click, followed by a low hum. The console lit up beneath them, lines of light spreading outward in intricate patterns. The walls responded, screens activating one by one, flooding the room with information. Emily stepped back, startled. What? Margaret's voice remained calm. Your cousins inherited land, she said. But land alone means nothing without access. The screens shifted, showing water rights, transport routes, legal access points, supply chains. All of this, Margaret continued, is controlled from here. Caleb stepped closer, his expression tightening. They don't have any of this, do they? He asked. Margaret shook her head. No. Emily stared at the screens, at the system, at the truth unfolding in front of her. They own it, she whispered. Margaret looked at her. They think they do. Emily felt something shift inside her. Not confusion, not fear. Something else. Something stronger. Because for the first time, she understood. The coin in her hand had never been worth $1. It had been worth everything. And Atlas hadn't chosen her by accident. He had recognized her. Because this place, this system, this entire hidden world had always been waiting for her. And now, it was awake. The screens didn't just glow, they moved. Lines pulsed across digital maps. Routes lit up in quiet waves of motion. Numbers shifted in real time. Contracts, permissions, access controls, each one tied to something far beyond what Emily had ever seen from the outside. She stood in the center of it, breath shallow, eyes trying to keep up. This is everything, she asked. Margaret Langford nodded calmly. Everything that matters. Caleb stepped closer to one of the displays, his gaze sharpening as he recognized the patterns. This isn't just land management, he said. This is infrastructure. Margaret gave a slight smile. Your grandfather didn't believe in surface ownership. He believed in control. Emily's eyes moved from one screen to another. Water systems, transport corridors, private access roads, legal overlays that connected properties across miles of land. It wasn't a ranch empire. It was a network. And at the center of it, her. A soft chime echoed through the room. Emily flinched slightly. What was that? Margaret turned toward a side panel. First signal. The screen shifted. A message appeared. Access denied. Water route authorization. Location, North Ridge Ranch. Emily's breath caught. That's Ryan's property, she said. Caleb folded his arms slowly. Not anymore. Another chime, then another. The system began to populate with alerts. Supply route interrupted, transport clearance revoked, permit authorization invalid, each one tied to a different part of the land, each one tied to someone who thought they owned it. Emily stepped back, overwhelmed. This is happening now? Margaret nodded. It began the moment the system recognized you. Emily looked down at the console, at the coin, at Atlas. Because of me? Because of who you are, Margaret corrected gently. The screens shifted again. Live feeds appeared, remote cameras placed across the ranch lands. Emily watched as workers stood beside trucks that refused to move, as locked gates blocked access roads, as confused voices filled the air in silent video clips. Then, One feed caught her attention. Ryan, standing in the middle of a snow-covered field, his phone pressed to his ear, his posture tense. Even without sound, she could see it. Panic. Caleb exhaled slowly. Took less time than I expected. Emily stared at the screen. They don't understand what's happening. No, Caleb said. They don't. Margaret stepped closer. They were given ownership, she said, but ownership without access is nothing. Emily watched as Ryan turned sharply, shouting at someone off camera. Another feed showed Blake arguing with workers near a transport truck. Another showed Vanessa pacing in front of the lodge, her composure cracking for the first time. They're losing everything, Emily whispered. Caleb glanced at her. They never had it. The room fell quiet again, except for the soft hum of the system. Emily felt something rising inside her. Not satisfaction. Not yet. Something more complicated. Because she remembered the laughter, the humiliation, the cold. But she also remembered who she was before that, and who she didn't want to become. Another alert flashed. Emily turned back to the screen. Incoming request. Access restoration from Ryan Whitaker. He was trying to fix it, trying to gain control. Emily's hand hovered slightly above the console. What happens if I approve it? She asked. Margaret answered without hesitation. Everything returns to how it was. Emily swallowed. And if I don't? Caleb spoke this time. Then they learn. Emily looked at him. His expression wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was steady, grounded. They made a choice, Caleb said. Now they get to see what that choice costs. Emily looked back at the screen, at the blinking request, at the name. Ryan Whitaker. For a moment, her fingers trembled. Then, she pulled her hand back. The request expired. Denied. The screen shifted. Access permanently restricted. Emily let out a slow breath. The room seemed to settle around her. Not heavier. Clearer. Margaret nodded once, approving. The system recognizes authority, she said. Caleb studied Emily carefully. You okay? He asked. Emily didn't answer right away. She watched as the feeds continued to update, as the confusion outside grew, as the illusion of control began to break apart. Then she said quietly, They thought I was nothing. Caleb nodded. And now? Emily looked at the console, at the system, at the truth. Now she wasn't nothing. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't the girl standing in the snow with nowhere to go. She was something else, something they had never seen coming. Emily lifted her gaze. They're going to come looking for answers, she said. Caleb gave a small, knowing nod. Yeah, he said. They are. Atlas shifted beside her, his presence steady, grounded. Not tense, not aggressive. Ready. Emily reached down, resting her hand lightly against his neck. And for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She felt in control. But somewhere deep beneath that feeling, a question remained. Not about what she could do, but about what she should do. And that question was just beginning. The screens dimmed slightly as Margaret adjusted the system, shifting the room from alert mode to observation. The hum softened. The urgency faded into something quieter, more controlled. But inside Caleb Hayes, nothing was quiet. He stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The light from the monitors reflected faintly across his face, but his thoughts were somewhere else entirely, somewhere darker. Emily noticed it. At first, it was subtle, the way his posture stiffened, the way his breathing changed, slower, heavier, like he was bracing for something that wasn't there. "Caleb?" she said softly. No response. Atlas noticed it too. The dog's ears shifted slightly, his body angling toward Caleb instead of Emily for the first time since they had arrived. "Caleb?" Emily tried again. This time he blinked, like he had just come back from somewhere far away. "I'm fine," he said quickly. But he wasn't. Margaret watched from across the room, her expression calm but knowing. "He's not in this room," she said quietly. Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Margaret didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped closer to Emily. "Your grandfather didn't just trust Caleb because of what he could do," she said. "He trusted him because he understood what he carried." Emily looked back at Caleb. "What he carries?" Margaret's voice softened. "War doesn't always stay where it happens." The words settled heavily. Emily understood, not from experience, but from the way Caleb moved, the way he watched everything, the way silence seemed to weigh on him more than sound. Caleb turned slightly, as if sensing their attention. "I said I'm fine," he repeated. Emily nodded gently. "Okay." But she didn't look away. Neither did Atlas. A few minutes later, Margaret led them out of the command room and into a quieter part of the estate. A hallway lined with wooden beams and soft lighting, rooms that felt less like control centers and more like living spaces. "Get some rest," Margaret said. "Tomorrow will bring clarity." Emily nodded. Caleb didn't respond. That night, the mountain was silent again. But inside the estate, something broke. A sound echoed down the hallway. Sharp. Sudden. Emily woke instantly. Her heart jumped as she sat up in bed, the unfamiliar room spinning for a second before settling into focus. The fire in the corner had burned low, casting faint shadows across the walls. Then, another sound. A voice. Not loud, but strained. Emily stepped out into the hallway. The cold floor pressed through her socks as she followed the sound. Down the corridor. Around the corner. She found him. Caleb stood in the middle of a small room, his breathing uneven, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes were open, but not seeing. Not really. "Caleb?" Emily said carefully. No response. He took a step back, then another, like he was moving through something that wasn't there. "Stay down," he snapped suddenly. Emily froze. The words weren't for her. They were for someone else. Somewhere else. Atlas moved before she could. The dog stepped between them, calm but firm, his presence immediate. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stood there. Then slowly, he pressed forward, his body against Caleb's leg, grounding him. Caleb's breathing hitched. His hands loosened slightly. Atlas stayed with him, steady, patient. Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "They were right there," he murmured. "I told them to wait. I told them." His shoulders trembled. Emily felt something in her chest tighten. She stepped closer, but carefully. "Caleb," she said softly, "you're here." No response. Atlas shifted again, nudging Caleb's hand with his nose. Once. Twice. Caleb's fingers twitched. Then, he grabbed onto the dog's collar. Not hard. Just enough. Like he needed something real, something solid. His breathing slowed. gradually, painfully, until finally, he blinked, and this time, he saw the room, the walls, Atlas, Emily. He let go slowly, exhaled. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough. Emily shook her head gently. "You don't have to be." Caleb ran a hand over his face, exhaustion settling into his expression. "Just happens sometimes," he muttered. Atlas remained close, not leaving his side, not even for a second. Emily stepped a little closer. "You don't have to go through it alone," she said. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, not as someone he was helping, but as someone who understood something deeper. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe I don't." There was a long silence, but it wasn't heavy anymore, not the way it had been. Atlas shifted again. Then, something changed. The dog turned, not toward Caleb, toward Emily. He stepped away, slowly, deliberately, and came to her side. Caleb noticed it immediately. His eyes followed the movement. Atlas stopped beside Emily, sat, calm, certain. Caleb stared at him. "That's," he said softly, "that's not random." Emily felt it too. The shift, the meaning behind it. Atlas had been Caleb's anchor, his partner, his lifeline. And now, he was choosing her, not instead of Caleb, but with her. Caleb let out a slow breath. A faint, almost invisible smile touched his face. "Well," he said quietly, "guess that settles it." Emily looked at him. "What?" Caleb nodded toward Atlas. "He knows," he said. Emily glanced down at the dog. Atlas looked up at her, steady, unquestioning, trusting. And for the first time, Emily didn't feel like she was stepping into something unknown. She felt like she was stepping into something meant. Outside, the wind moved through the mountains again. But inside, for the first time since the night began, there was something close to peace, even if it was only temporary, because the world beyond those walls was already starting to change, and soon it would come looking for them. Morning arrived quietly over the mountains. Soft light crept through the tall windows of the hidden estate, brushing across stone walls and polished wood floors. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clean, untouched world of snow and sky. Inside, the system was already awake. Emily stood in the command room again, her eyes fixed on the screens. The events of the night before still lingered in her chest, but something had changed. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was watching, learning. Caleb stood beside her, quieter than usual, but more grounded. The storm inside him had settled, at least for now. Atlas remained at Emily's side, calm and alert, his presence steady. Margaret moved between panels, bringing up new feeds. "They didn't sleep," she said. Emily looked up. "Your cousins," Margaret continued. "They've been trying to regain access since midnight." The screen shifted. Ryan appeared again, this time inside the lodge, pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp even without sound. Papers were scattered across the table. A laptop sat open, flashing error messages. Blake stood nearby, arguing with someone just off camera, his frustration visible in every movement. Vanessa was different. She wasn't yelling. She was still, too still, watching everything fall apart around her. They don't understand what they're up against, Caleb said. No, Margaret replied, but they will. Emily crossed her arms slowly. What happens next? She asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. They escalate. Almost as if the system heard her. Another alert flashed. Unauthorized access attempt detected perimeter breach, Southern Ridge. Caleb's posture changed instantly. Where? He asked. Margaret pulled up the location. A map appeared, highlighting a remote section of land not far from the estate. Someone's trying to find us, Caleb said. Emily's stomach tightened. Who? Margaret zoomed in. A vehicle, moving fast, off-road. Blake, Emily said quietly. The screen sharpened, and there he was. Blake Whitaker, behind the wheel of a truck, pushing it through terrain it wasn't built for. Snow kicked up behind him as he forced his way toward coordinates he didn't fully understand. He's guessing, Caleb said, trying to trace access points. Emily's pulse quickened. What if he finds this place? He won't, Caleb said. But his voice had changed, because even guessing could be dangerous. Margaret activated another layer of the system. Redirecting barriers, she said calmly. On the screen, paths shifted. Access routes closed. Digital locks reinforced physical ones. The mountain itself began to turn against the intruder. Blake's truck hit uneven ground, swerved, corrected, but kept going. He's not stopping, Emily said. No, Caleb replied. He's desperate. Atlas stood, his body tensed, not with fear, with readiness. The screen flickered again. Blake's truck pushed through a narrow ridge, then suddenly stopped. The engine revved, spun, but the wheels found no traction. The ground beneath him had softened, hidden beneath a thin layer of snow. He was stuck. Blake slammed his hands against the wheel, shouting. The sound wasn't audible, but the frustration was clear. Emily let out a slow breath. He's not getting any closer, she said. No, Caleb agreed, but that's not the point. Emily looked at him. The point is, they're not done, Caleb said, as if proving him right. Another alert appeared. Incoming message request from Vanessa Whitaker. Emily hesitated. Margaret looked at her. She's trying a different approach. Emily stared at the screen. Vanessa's face appeared in a small window. No anger. No arrogance. Just tension. Emily, Vanessa said, her voice finally coming through the speakers. We need to talk. Emily didn't respond. Vanessa exhaled slowly. I don't know what you think is happening, but something is wrong, she continued. Systems are failing. Contracts are being rejected. We can't access anything. Emily felt something stir inside her. Not satisfaction, not yet. Recognition. You need to fix this, Vanessa said. There it was. Not a request, an expectation. Emily stepped closer to the console. For years, she said quietly, I lived in that house. Vanessa froze. You barely spoke to me, Emily continued. You barely saw me. Vanessa's expression tightened. This isn't about that, she said. Emily shook her head slightly. No, she said. It is. Silence filled the room. Vanessa's voice softened just a little. Then help us, she said. Emily looked at the screen, at the person who had laughed, who had watched, who had done nothing. Her hand hovered over the console again. Caleb watched her closely. This was different. This wasn't reaction. This was choice. Emily lowered her hand. The connection cut. Vanessa's face disappeared. The screen went dark. Margaret nodded once. They'll feel that, she said. Emily didn't answer. She turned away from the console, but before she could take a step, another alert hit. Sharper, louder. Security breach detected North Access Point. Caleb moved instantly. Where? He demanded. Margaret pulled it up. A figure. Closer this time. Not in a vehicle. On foot. Moving carefully. Deliberately. Not guessing. Tracking. Caleb's eyes narrowed. That's not one of them, he said. Atlas stepped forward. His entire body shifted. Focused. Locked. Protective. Emily felt it immediately. The air changed. This wasn't desperation. This was intent. Caleb reached for the side panel, pulling up external feeds, scanning angles, calculating distance. Stay behind me, he said. Emily didn't argue. Atlas moved in front of her, low, ready. The figure on the screen moved closer, step by step, until it disappeared from view. The feed cut. Static. Silence. The system paused, waiting. Caleb's voice dropped. They found us. Emily's heart pounded, not with fear, with something sharper. Because this wasn't about the past anymore. This was now, and whatever was coming was no longer outside. It was here. The command room held its breath. No alarms blared. No flashing red lights. Just a quiet, deliberate shift in the system. Like something unseen had crossed a line it wasn't supposed to. Caleb stood perfectly still, his focus narrowing. Show me all exterior feeds, he said. Margaret moved without hesitation, her fingers gliding across the controls. Screens shifted, cycling through camera angles, tree lines, ridges, narrow passes, the long approach road hidden beneath snow. Nothing. Then, a flicker. A figure appeared for half a second between two trees. Gone again. Caleb leaned closer. Playback. The system rewound, frame by frame. The image stabilized just long enough to catch a glimpse. A man. Not Blake. Not Ryan. Older. Heavier coat. Moving with purpose. Not lost. Not guessing. Tracking. Emily felt her pulse in her throat. Who is that? Caleb didn't answer right away. Because something about the movement, the posture, it wasn't random. He knows what he's doing, Caleb said finally. Atlas stood rigid at Emily's side, his ears forward, his body angled toward the direction of the last known movement. Margaret zoomed out, bringing up a wider map. He's not alone, she said. Two more faint heat signatures appeared at the edge of the display, holding position, waiting. Emily's chest tightened. They're surrounding us? No, Caleb said quietly. They're probing. He stepped back from the screen, his voice steady, controlled. Not family, he added. Something else. Emily looked between them. Why would anyone else come here? Margaret's expression darkened slightly. Because your grandfather's work didn't exist in isolation, she said. Emily frowned. What does that mean? It means, Caleb said, if this place controls what we think it does, other people would want it. Silence settled. Heavy now. Real. Atlas let out a low, almost inaudible rumble. Not aggressive, but aware. Then, the system chimed again. A different tone this time. Margaret turned. Incoming transmission, she said. From who? Caleb asked. Margaret hesitated. Then the screen changed, and 3 familiar faces appeared. Ryan, Blake, Vanessa. All in the same room back at the lodge, but very different now. No laughter, no confidence, just tension and fear. "Emily," Ryan said immediately, "we need to talk, now." Caleb glanced at Emily. "This is it," he said. Emily stepped forward slowly. The system responded to her presence, the main display centering on her automatically. She didn't rush, didn't react. She simply stood there and looked at them. "You already tried," she said calmly. Ryan exhaled sharply. "Yeah, and everything's still locked down. We can't move livestock, we can't access water lines, contracts are collapsing. What did you do?" Emily didn't answer that. Instead, she asked, "What did you do?" The question hung there. Blake scoffed, but it lacked its old edge. "Don't turn this around. You're the one controlling this." "Yes," Emily said. The word cut through everything. Clear, certain. Blake fell silent. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "Then stop it," she said. "Whatever this is, just stop it." Emily's gaze didn't shift. "Why?" she asked. Ryan stared at her. "Because this is our family's land." Emily shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "It's not." The silence that followed was different this time. Not confusion. Recognition. Ryan's expression changed. You know something," he said slowly. Emily didn't deny it. Blake leaned closer to the screen. "Then say it." Emily took a breath. Then she spoke. "You inherited property," she said. "Land, buildings, names." Ryan frowned. "Yeah, that's what inheritance is." Emily's voice remained steady. "But you didn't inherit control." The words landed. Blake's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Emily didn't rush. She let it settle. Let them feel it. Then, "It means," she said, "everything you think you own only works because of something you don't." Vanessa's face went pale. Ryan shook his head. "That's not possible." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Then why isn't anything working?" No one answered. Because they didn't have one. Caleb watched quietly from behind her. Atlas remained at her side, unmoving, unshaken. Emily stepped closer to the console. The system responded instantly. Maps appeared. Connections. Hidden layers. She turned the display toward them. "Look," she said. They did, and for the first time, they saw it. The truth. Water rights tied to unseen access points. Supply routes controlled by systems they didn't own. Legal authority rooted somewhere else. Somewhere hidden. Somewhere here. Ryan's face drained of color. "This," he said slowly. "This can't be real." Emily met his eyes. "It is." Blake shook his head, backing away slightly. No, this is some kind of trick." Emily didn't react. Vanessa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where is this?" she asked. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out the silver dollar, and placed it on the console. The system responded instantly. The room brightened. The connections locked. Final. Absolute. Emily looked back at them. "This," she said, "is what you laughed at." Silence. Heavy. unavoidable. Then, she reached into a drawer beneath the console, pulled out 3 identical coins, and placed them on the surface. 1, 2, 3. "I'll make you an offer," she said. Ryan stared at the coins. Blake didn't move. Vanessa looked like she couldn't breathe. Emily's voice remained calm. "You can sell me everything you inherited." Ryan blinked. "What?" Emily didn't hesitate. "For $1 each." The room on the other side of the screen went completely still. Ryan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking." Emily didn't smile. "You offered me the same value," she said. Blake stepped forward. "That was different." Emily shook her head. "No," she said. "It wasn't." Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, realizing, understanding. Finally. Ryan's voice hardened. "And if we don't?" Emily's gaze didn't waver. "Then you keep what you have," she said, "and watch it disappear." The silence that followed was absolute, because for the first time, they weren't in control. Emily let the moment settle. Then she stepped back. "Think about it," she said, and the screen went dark. The room returned to quiet. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "that was one way to do it." Emily didn't respond. She looked at the coins on the console, at the system around her, at Atlas beside her. Then she said quietly, "They needed to see it." Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "They did." Outside, the mountains stood silent, unmoved, unshaken. But inside, everything had changed. And there was no going back now. The mountain held its silence. Outside, the snow lay untouched across the ridges, soft light stretching over the valley below. Nothing in the landscape showed what had just happened inside those stone walls. But inside the estate, the air had shifted. The system remained active, steady, waiting for its next command. The 3 silver dollars still rested on the console, catching the faint light, their presence heavier now than before. Emily stood in front of them, not moving, not speaking. Caleb leaned against the far side of the room, arms crossed, watching her carefully. Atlas sat beside her, calm and grounded, his presence steady as always. Margaret remained near the control panel, silent, allowing the moment to unfold. "They'll respond," Caleb said after a while. Emily nodded slightly. "I know. They won't like the offer. I know that too." Caleb studied her. "And if they refuse?" Emily didn't answer right away. She looked at the screens, now quiet, but still filled with the structure her grandfather had built, the same structure that had turned their certainty into confusion overnight. "They already are," she said finally. Caleb pushed off the wall and walked closer. "So what's the next move?" he asked. Emily let out a slow breath. That question again. Not what she could do, but what she should do before she could answer. The system chimed. A single, sharp tone. All 3 of them turned. Margaret stepped forward, bringing up the incoming feed. "It's them," she said. The screen lit up. Ryan, Blake, Vanessa. But they were no longer standing together. Ryan sat alone at the table, his posture rigid, his expression worn down in a way Emily had never seen before. Blake stood behind him, pacing, restless, but quieter now. Vanessa sat off to the side, still, watching. Emily stepped forward. The system centered on her again. No hesitation this time. Ryan spoke first. "We'll take the deal." The words landed hard. Caleb raised an eyebrow slightly. Emily didn't react. Not outwardly. Say it again, she said. Ryan swallowed. We'll sell, he repeated. All of it. Blake stopped pacing. You win, he muttered. Vanessa didn't speak. She didn't need to. Emily held their gaze. For a moment she said nothing. Then, why? She asked. Ryan frowned slightly. What? Why now? Emily said. You didn't believe me before. Blake let out a quiet, bitter breath. Because it's real, he said. Everything you showed us. We checked it. Lawyers, advisors, every angle. Ryan nodded slowly. We don't own what we thought we did, he admitted. Vanessa finally looked up. And without it, she said softly, we have nothing. Silence followed. Not tense, not hostile, just honest. Emily stepped closer to the console, her reflection faintly visible in the dark surface. You had everything, she said quietly. Ryan didn't argue. Yeah, he said. And you still chose to tear someone down who had nothing, Emily continued. Blake looked away. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Ryan exhaled slowly. We were wrong. The words felt strange in the room, unfamiliar, but real. Emily looked at them, really looked. Not as the people who laughed, but as the people they were now. And for the first time, they didn't look powerful. They looked lost. Caleb watched her closely. He knew this moment. This was where everything could shift again. Not with force, with choice. Emily reached down. Her fingers touched the 3 silver dollars on the console. She picked them up, held them for a second, then set them back down. You can sell, she said. Relief flickered across Ryan's face. But not like this. The relief vanished. Blake frowned. What does that mean? Emily met his eyes. It means you don't get to walk away and pretend none of this happened. Silence. You don't get to lose everything and learn nothing, she continued. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. Then what are you saying? She asked. Emily's voice remained steady. I'm saying you can earn it back. Ryan blinked. What? Emily gestured toward the screens. All of this. It doesn't run on ownership. It runs on people who understand it. Caleb's expression shifted slightly. He saw where this was going. You want us to work for you, Blake said. Emily shook her head. No, she said. I want you to work for something real. Blake scoffed lightly, but it lacked its old bite. And what's that? Emily didn't hesitate. A chance to build something you didn't inherit. Vanessa stared at her. You're serious? Emily nodded. You start from the bottom, she said. You learn how this system actually works. You contribute. You earn your place. Ryan shook his head slowly. You're asking us to give up everything. Emily's gaze didn't waver. You already did. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was reflective. Vanessa spoke first. And if we say no? Emily's answer came without pause. Then nothing changes. Blake looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at Vanessa. Something passed between them, unspoken. Then, Ryan nodded. Slowly. Okay, he said. Blake let out a breath. Yeah. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. Okay. Emily watched them, not with satisfaction, with understanding. Then we start over, she said. Caleb exhaled quietly behind her. Atlas remained still at her side. The system hummed softly around them, and for the first time since the will was read, the future didn't feel like a battle. It felt like something else. Something harder. Something better. A chance. Emily reached forward. The system responded. The structure shifted again. Not to destroy, to rebuild. And in that moment, power stopped being about control and became something else entirely. Responsibility. And Emily Carter chose to carry it. The mountain did not celebrate. It did not change its shape or soften its edges. It simply stood, as it always had, steady and unmoved, watching the quiet transformation unfolding beneath its surface. Winter passed slowly. Then, almost without notice, it began to loosen its grip. Snow melted along the lower ridges first, revealing dark earth beneath. Streams returned, carving silver lines through the valley. Pine trees shed their weight, standing taller again under open skies. And the estate came to life, not with noise, with purpose. Emily stood on the upper balcony one early morning, her hands resting lightly on the cold stone railing. The valley stretched wide before her, no longer buried in white, but alive with movement. Vehicles moved along controlled routes. Teams worked across the land. Structures once locked in silence now operated with precision. It was no longer hidden. Not entirely. But it was no longer misunderstood either. Behind her, the door opened quietly. Caleb stepped out, closing it with a soft click. "You're up early," he said. Emily didn't turn right away. "Couldn't sleep," she replied. Caleb walked over, standing beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. "You built something," Caleb said after a while. Emily shook her head slightly. "No, it was already here." "You made it work," he corrected. Emily looked out across the valley again. "It was never about owning it," she said. "That's what they got wrong." Caleb nodded. "And now?" Emily exhaled softly. "Now it's about taking care of it." Below them, a group of workers moved across one of the lower fields, setting up new irrigation lines. Further out, a transport vehicle followed a route that had once been locked down, now open under new management. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. Caleb followed her gaze. "They're adjusting," he said. Emily nodded. "They have to." The door opened again. This time, 3 figures stepped out. Ryan, Blake, Vanessa. They didn't look the same, not like they had in the lodge. The confidence was gone. So was the arrogance. What remained was something quieter. Real. Ryan stepped forward first, stopping a few feet away. "We finished the south route adjustments," he said. "Water flow's stable now." Emily nodded. "Good." Blake crossed his arms, but not defensively, just thinking. "The transport schedule needed changes," he added. "We fixed the delays." Vanessa didn't speak immediately. She looked out over the valley, then said softly, "It's different." Emily glanced at her. "Yeah," she said. "It is." Vanessa nodded once. "I didn't understand any of this before," she admitted. Emily didn't respond, because she didn't need to. They all knew it. Ryan shifted slightly. "We're still learning," he said. Emily met his eyes. "That's the point." There was no tension in the exchange, no resentment, just truth. Caleb watched it all from the side. He had seen men change before. But not like this, not without being broken first. Atlas stepped out onto the balcony. His movements were slower now. The injury from weeks before still showed in the slight stiffness of his leg. The scar along his side was visible beneath his coat, a reminder of what had almost been lost. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, loyal, unshaken. He walked past Caleb, past the others, and came to stand beside Emily, like he always did. Emily reached down, her hand resting gently against his neck. "You're supposed to be resting," she murmured. Atlas didn't move, didn't argue. He simply stayed. Caleb smiled faintly. "He's not good at that," he said. Emily smiled just a little. "Yeah," she said. "I've noticed." The wind moved softly across the balcony, carrying the scent of pine and earth. For a moment, everything felt still. Not empty, complete. Margaret stepped out last, pausing in the doorway. She took in the scene quietly, then nodded to herself. "It's done," she said. Emily looked back at her. "Not done," she replied. "Just beginning." Margaret smiled. "That's exactly what he hoped you'd say." Emily turned back to the valley. Her fingers brushed lightly against the silver dollar in her pocket. She pulled it out, held it up in the morning light. It didn't shine. Not the way something valuable usually did. It looked simple, ordinary. But she knew better now. It had never been about what it looked like. It had been about what it meant. Behind her, voices continued quietly. Plans, work, future. Caleb remained nearby. Atlas stood at her side. The mountains stretched endlessly before her. And for the first time, Emily Carter didn't feel like someone who had lost everything. She felt like someone who had been given something far greater. Not wealth, not power, but understanding. The kind that couldn't be taken. The kind that had to be earned. She closed her hand around the coin, then lowered it slowly. The sun rose higher over the mountains, casting light across the land that now moved under her care. And in that quiet moment, the story that had begun with a single dollar ended with something no one in that lodge had ever truly understood. Value. Real value. And it had been hers all along. If you believe respect should be earned, not inherited, type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this remind you that quiet strength always wins in the end, go ahead and subscribe. We've got more real stories coming your way.